Peace everybody, back with another video. This is a breaking news. Kirk Douglas, Hollywood tough guy and Spartacus superstar, dies at 103. Yeah, so Kirk Douglas had passed away at 103 years old, and as you can see here in the picture is him, who had passed away at 103 years old. Kirk Douglas, the self-described Ragman's son, who became a global Hollywood superstar in the 1950s and 60s, died on Wednesday. He was 103. Douglas was often cast as a troubled, tough guy in films, most famously as a rebellious Roman slave named Spartacus. Off-screen, he was devoted to family and to humanitarian causes. Yes, so Kirk Douglas passed away today at the age of 103 years old. Kirk Douglas is also the self-described Ragman's son, who became a global Hollywood superstar in the 1950s and 60s. He was often cast as a troubled, tough guy in films, most famously as a rebellious Roman slave named Spartacus. While he was off screen, he was devoted to family and to humanitarian causes. His son Michael Douglas announced the actor's death. To the world, he was a legend, but to me and my brothers, Joel and Peter, he was simply Dad. So Michael Douglas had announced the actor's death. He said to the world he was a legend, but to me and my brothers, Joel and Peter, he was simply Dad. Kirk's life was well lived, and he leaves a legacy in film that will endure for generations to come, and a history as a renowned philanthropist who worked to aid the public and bring peace to the planet. Michael Douglas wrote. So Kirk's life was well lived, so he lived a whole century. And he leaves a legacy in film that will endure for generations to come and in history as a renowned philanthropist. Kirk Douglas was a classic Hollywood alpha male with his cleft chin, his gritty voice, and a set of his jaw that made him seem to be talking through clenched teeth. He made a conscious choice to go his own way by playing men who went theirs. In Stanley Kubrick's World War I epic, Paths of Glory, Douglas played the principal Colonel Dax, stepping into an iconic role of the good man fighting the establishment. And so Kirk Douglas was a classic Hollywood alpha male. That's who he was. With his cleft chin, his gritty voice, and a set of his jaw, that made him seem to be talking through clenched teeth. He also made a conscious choice to go his own way by playing men who went theirs. In Stanley Kubrick's World War I epic, Paths of Glory, Douglas played the principal Colonel Dax as well, stepping into the iconic role of the good man fighting the establishment. But Douglas seemed almost more comfortable playing what he liked to call tough sons of bitches, or flawed men who were one way or another gaming the system. Two of his earliest title roles as the backstabbing boxer and champion and the self-destructive coordinist and young man with the horn portrayed stars who turn into heels just as the public embraces them. So he played the roles as a backstabbing boxer and champion and the self-destructive coordinist and a young man with a horn. He also portrayed stars who turn into heroes just as the public embraces him. Before long, Douglas had developed that reputation himself. Looking back in his memoirs, Douglas described his younger self as egotistical and ambitious, and claimed not to like him very much. But his best performance, such as his portrayal of an abrasive but driven Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life, were memorably electric. Okay, so Douglas had developed that reputation himself, looking back at it in his memoirs. He also described his younger self as egotistical and ambitious, and claimed not to like him very much. He also had best performance, such as his portrayal of an abrasive but driven Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life. For more than 2 decades in Hollywood, Douglas cast a giant shadow, as one of his titles proclaimed, playing 2 or even 3 starring roles each year. When he was not cast for Ben-Hur, losing the role of Charlton Heston, Douglas countered the loss months later with his own Roman epic, Spartacus. Douglas produced the film and starred as the title character who famously revolted against the Roman captors. And so it was 2 decades that Hollywood Douglas cast a giant shadow, as one of his titles proclaimed, playing 2 or even 3 starring roles each year. So every year he'll play 2 or 3 roles. When he was not cast for Ben-Hur, losing the role to Charlton Heston, Douglas countered the lost months later with his own Roman epic, Spartacus. So Spartacus, he played in that one. He also produced the film and starred as the title character who famously revolted against his Roman captors. And here is a picture of Kirk Douglas. This was taken in December of 2014. So this is who he is. Off-screen, Douglas also led an open revolt against Hollywood's blacklist. The communist witch hunts of the 1950s had destroyed many careers, including that of Spartacus. Screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, who had written for years under an alias, Douglas was disguised by this hypocrisy and said, "To hell with it." He put Trumbo's real name in the film credits. Yeah, so Douglas also led an open revolt against Hollywood's blacklist. So he was blacklisted as well. The communist witch hunts of the 1950s had destroyed many careers. So that's what it does. It destroys careers, including that of Spartacus screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, who had written for years under an alias. So, and Douglas was disguised by this hypocrisy and saying, "To hell with it." He put Trumbo's real name in the film credits, so he gave all the credits to Trumbo. When Spartacus became a hit, the blacklist was effectively finished. More than 3 decades later, speaking with NPR's Susan Stamberg, Douglas reflected upon this impulsive but life-defining decision. Sometimes I often think that if I were much older, would I still have done it? Anyhow, I did it. It was an impulsive thing. I'm proud of it. I think it's one of the good things that I've done in life. So when Spartacus was a hit, the blacklist was effectively finished. So there was no more blacklist whatsoever of Spartacus. He More than 3 decades later, he speaking with the NPR Susan Stamberg. Douglas did reflect upon this impulsive but life-defining decision. He also said, "Sometimes I often think that if I were much older, would I still have done it? Anyhow, I did it. So yes, he has done it. He said also go on to say, I'm proud of it. I think it's one of the good things that I've done in life. Douglas, the bold blacklist breaker, had come a long way and from very humble beginnings. Born Izur Danilovich in New York to illiterate dependency, poor Russian Jewish parents. He was the only boy among 7 siblings. He would later tell his own children that they didn't have his advantage of being born into abject poverty. So Douglas was born Izur Danilovich in New York to illiterate disparity poor Russian Jewish parents. He was the only boy among 7 siblings. He would later tell his own children that they didn't have his advantage of being born into abject poverty. So that's what he told his children. From an early age, that advantage forced Douglas to put himself out there with the public, and he worked odd jobs, scrounged for food, and talked his way into college and loans, acting school, and a stint in the Navy followed college, as well as minor success on Broadway using the new stage name that he would keep for the rest of his career. Then Hollywood beckoned, and within 4 years, Douglas had made 8 films, had established his persona as a tough guy, and had earned the first of his 3 Oscar nominations as a barrel-chested prize fighter and champion. And so he had, at his early stage, that advantage forced Douglas to put himself out there with the public, and he worked odd jobs, scrounged for food, and of course it's not easy. You gotta work odd jobs, and you gotta scrounge around for food. And he also talked his way into college and loans. Acting school and a stint in the Navy followed college, as well as minor success on Broadway using the stage name that he would keep for the rest of his career, and sure enough, he did. He also had established his persona as a tough guy and had earned the first of his 3 Oscar nominations as a barrel-chested prize fighter and champion. True to the roles he liked to play, success did not make Douglas a nice guy. Though married, he has affairs with actresses Rita Hayworth, Marlene Dietrich, and Ava Gardner. He was mostly an absentee father to his first 2 sons. Frequently, he broke studio contracts and feuded with directors. In 1964, he said, I am probably the most disliked actor in Hollywood, and I feel pretty good about it because that's me. Alright, so Kirk Douglas, while he was married, he would have affairs with actresses Rita Hayworth, Marlene Dietrich, and Ava Gardner. He was also mostly an absentee father to his first 2 sons. Frequently, he broke studio contracts and feuded with directors. In 1964, he also said, I am probably the most disliked actor in Hollywood, and I feel pretty good about it because that's me. And here's Douglas with his eldest son, Joel, in the center, and Michael Circa in 1956. The 1960s were his glory days as he starred in hit after hit. Douglas battled a presidential overthrow in 7 Days in May and was torn between Faye Dunaway and Deborah Kerr in the argument. He played gunslingers, lawyers, admirals, doctors, and conmen, and he worked steadily through the next 2 decades. So yeah, the 1960s were his glory days as he started in hit after hit. He also battled a presidential overthrow in 7 days in May and was torn between Faye Dunaway and Deborah Kerr in the argument. He also played gunslingers, lawyers, admirals, doctors, and conmen, and he worked steadily through the next 2 decades. When the tough guy shtick got old, Douglas turned to comedy and mocked it in a film called Tough Guys, in which he starred with his friend and frequent co-star Burt Lancaster. Not even a helicopter crash in 1991, when he was 74, slowed Douglas down, though the fact that a pilot and another passenger had died, he told NPR, did change his worldview. It makes you think about other people, Douglas said. I think that you have to, as you get old in life and as you mature, you have to be aware more of the outside world and other people. So he kind of figured, well, when the tough guy shtick got old, he turned to comedy and mocked it in a film called Tough Guys, in which he starred with his friend and frequent co-star Burt Lancaster. He also goes on. Not even a helicopter crash in 1991 when he was 74 slowed Douglas down, so it slowed him down some. Though the fact that a pilot and another passenger had died, he told the NPR, did change his world view. It makes you think about other people, Douglas said. So this is what he said. I think that you have to, as you get old in life and as you mature, you have to be aware more of the outside world and other people. So that's what he said. Just a year after that 1994 interview, a stroke left him almost entirely unable to speak. He had thoughts of suicide. He wrote, "What does an actor do who can't talk? Wait for silent pictures to come back?" So after that 1994 interview, he had a stroke that left him almost entirely unable to speak. He did have thoughts of suicide. He wrote, "What does an actor do who can't talk? Wait for silent pictures to come back?" Well, it is sad that he had thoughts of suicide, and nobody should ever go through this like he did, but he overcame it. Douglas' book, My Stroke of Luck, describes how he recovered by reaching out to others and by rediscovering the Judaism he'd been neglecting for 60 years. So he wrote a book, My Stroke of Luck. It describes how he recovered by reaching out to others and by rediscovering the Judaism he'd been neglecting for 60 years. So he did reach out to other people to help get over the suicide thoughts, because he had thoughts of suicide, and and with him reaching out to other people, it is good that he did reach out to other people so they can give him the strength that he needs to not commit suicide on himself. My condolences go to his family. I am sorry that this happened, but may peace be with his family. I am out.